I think that in terms of political ideology, China is less and less ideological. As I mentioned, there is this nationalistic ideology which is now growing. But people themselves are basically concerned with the need to get on and make money and improve their position in society and care for their kids and their parents and their retirement, etc. So they are very much focused on making money, as we discussed earlier. But how all of that will develop, or how it will gel in the future is very, very difficult to tell. But I do think that it will depend to a significant extent on how China is treated by the rest of the world. I think if the West was to close its doors on China, the US and Europe, to throw up protectionist barriers, to make life very difficult for Chinese companies trying to go out, then that could have a big backlash.
We've taxed China on $300 billion worth of goods and products being sold into our country. And if they don't want to trade with us anymore, that would be fine with me.
Why do they politicize all these things?
I think that the main point is that these companies are responding to a lot of accusations that are being flung by governments. In this case, the Trump administration made really outlandish charges, but it didn't back them up with any evidence. And the fact of the matter is that on concerns of issues of human rights and so forth, where every country has to do well and do better because we are all bound by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we should abide by United Nations processes. We have a United Nations Human Rights Council. We shouldn't have governments just making charges and accusations without evidence.
The report we're releasing today shows that the trend lines on human rights continue to move in the wrong direction.
In addition to citing Washington's poor handling of the pandemic, the report released by China says American democracy leads to political chaos, further tearing society apart.
We also see it in the ways authoritarian governments are using and exporting new technologies to surveil and harass citizens.
It said money-tainted politics distorted and suppressed public opinion.
We see it in the genocide being committed against the predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang.
So some cognitive dissonance really struck me hard when I heard some Western reports on my hometown, like the Han people are oppressors and the Uyghurs are sufferers.
With diplomatic passports from the Turkish consulate there, as Gladio operatives to Beijing, and from there into the region of Xinjiang, in this plot, in this operation to organize the dissent, the ethnic minority there, Uyghurs, against the mainland China and the Chinese government, etc. A lot of these people are taken out by the operatives, Gladio operatives, in this case most of the times by the Turks, because Uyghurs are Turkic minorities. Their heritage, their race, their language, etc. And they are taken out, they are trained, and they are armed, and then they are sent back.
Let's talk a little bit about the situation of the Uyghurs in Guantanamo Bay. Can you give us some updates on that situation? How many people are still being held?
The initially U.S. government picked up 22 Uyghurs from various places. Most of them are from Pakistan. Initially, they were sold to the U.S. military for a bounty of $5,000 per person. Soon after they being brought into Guantanamo, Bush administration realized that they had the wrong people. Even some officials openly stated that these Uyghurs happened to be the wrong place at the wrong time.
Especially now that we have Afghanistan as a kind of a base, you can see how easy it is to smuggle these people out, to get them out, train them, militaristically train them, and arm them, tell them what to do in terms of the next stage of operations, then send them back from the other side, going through Central Asian Caucasus to Afghanistan, and then back to Xinjiang, where, lo and behold, some terror events takes place, and people have no idea. How did they get the guns?
On October 28, 2013, an SUV ran through barricades in front of the gate tower and burst into flames. The attack killed 2 civilians and wounded over 40. The driver and the 2 passengers all died. The authorities soon declared the incident a terrorist attack. They said it was not an isolated incident outside Xinjiang, and that it marked a new phase of terrorist violence in China. Police identified the driver as Aisam. In recovered selfie videos, Aisam burns national flags of a dozen countries.
And the third reason we're there is because there are 20 million Uyghurs, and they don't like Han Chinese in Xinjiang province in western China. And if the CIA has to mount an operation using those Uyghurs, as Erdogan has done in Turkey against Assad,
we all recognize now that what was said about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was a lie. And we all recognize now that what was said about Libya before NATO launched its war was a lie.
Chinese internet users have called for a boycott of H&M because it won't use cotton from Xinjiang. Hi, Philip. Tell us how all of this came about.
Internet users in China on Chinese social media platform Weibo started a campaign to boycott H&M because they found a statement that said H&M wouldn't use cotton from Xinjiang anymore, and this is a very touchy subject in China. Xinjiang is sort of become a very controversial story. Western governments, including the US, accuse China of using forced labor in Xinjiang.
Hundreds of thousands of people from ethnic minorities, including the Uyghur community, are being forced by the Chinese authorities to pick cotton in the far western region of Xinjiang. That's according to information seen by the BBC. The evidence suggests that China's cotton crop, which makes up a fifth of the world's total supply, could be far more dependent on forced labour than was previously thought. Now, over the past few years, more than 1 million Uyghurs are thought to have been detained in so-called re-education camps.
Vocational training center, it's just like a campus. It's not labor camp, it's campus. I don't know how the BBC people got all this wrong information.
One of the things I really wanted to figure out was if there was any concern that the US government is putting so much money behind this narrative, funding overseas Uyghur groups millions of dollars and dedicating a lot of airtime towards it, and what this kind of effort usually means. We have a precedent for fake propaganda created to serve America's geopolitical interests, whether it be the weapons of mass destruction or fake incubator baby stories, and a host of other fake human rights abuses or false flag operations. And they have very good reason to want to disrupt China and its relationships. China's economy is now set to overtake America's sooner than expected. Resource-rich countries finally have a non-Western option for cooperative partnerships, China, and they're increasingly choosing that option, particularly in America's old stronghold of Latin America, countries who have suffered under the brutality of American government operations for a long time. Chinese telecommunication companies are offering new non-American options, which are of course being slandered as having back doors, according to the accusations of a country that has constantly wiretapped the phones of even allied countries. And there's an increasing risk that the renminbi will challenge the US dollar's global hegemony. We can see that with the potential of the digital renminbi and many other international settlements now being done in renminbi, effectively circumventing American sanctions, which are designed to strangle governments and kill its people. Add the context of Xinjiang being the site of Asia's largest oil deposits and the fact that it's a key doorway to China's Belt and Road Initiative, and that it suffered from pre-existing Islamic terrorism problems, the question suddenly becomes, how could you possibly not expect America to take a special interest in Xinjiang? And not because of human rights, knowing full well America's history. We're expected to believe that a population in China that has been growing faster than the majority Han Chinese, in part because they weren't subject to the one-child policy, where they have 20,000 mosques built for them, where their script is written on all the national currency, something we don't even do for our indigenous populations in Canada, where the biggest star in China is a Uyghur woman who was recently signed on by LV as their brand ambassador, where Uyghur kids can get into top universities easier than Han Chinese and have specific halal foods prepared for them in the canteen and prayer areas on campus. We're expected to believe that this population is being eradicated. It's a ridiculous statement, whether it be in a literal sense or even a cultural sense.
How were they trained militaristically? Because Xinjiang is under China's control. Well, they are trained outside, similar to with the Syrian opposition, and now there are so many different factions. Their trainings, everything took place outside Syria, outside Iraq, within the NATO domain, in this case in Turkey, and in countries, puppet countries like Jordan. And Chinese government, they are telling a different story. The truth is much closer to the Chinese side than it is to what the Westerners are saying. Xinjiang is going to be the next Taiwan, okay? There is, and imagine, when you look at the Pipelinistan, Pepe Escobar's favorite term for the region, and you look at the map, you see the importance of Xinjiang. That is the artery, the entry artery of energy, whether it's coming from Kazakhstan or Turkmenistan into China, whether it's natural gas or if it's oil, it has to pass.
Hello, I'm Fang Fang. I'm going to fly to Urumqi, the capital city of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region.